Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third episode of the Know-Hows of Real Estate. The first episode was on lending. The second episode was on title. And now we are privileged to have an appraiser with us today. And today we have Joanna Conde. Joanna, it was a state certified residential real estate appraiser. She is certified by the Appraisal Qualification Board of Appraisal Foundations to teach uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. And she was the founding president of the Arizona Association of Real Estate Appraisers. At that time, it was the largest organization of appraisers in Arizona. And also with us today, we have my friend and I apologize a little bit. I'm starting to get to look like him that we hang out with so much. I got the little haircut, the little gym thing.
You're looking good.
Mike Stensrud. How's it going, Mr. Mike?
It is doing really, really well. Merry Christmas to everybody. And glad to be part of this third podcast.
Yeah, this is exciting, and we're happy to have Joanna on the show today. So now I'll introduce, in the middle, in between us, is Joanna Conde. Hi, Joanna.
Hi, both of you. Hi, Mike. Hi, Kate. Hi, Kevin.
Good to see you, Joanna. So, Joanna, maybe you can just take us through just the appraisal process, just an explanation of the role of the appraisal in the real estate transaction, the purpose of the appraisal, and everything else you know.
Okay. Well, the appraisal is ordered by the lender. That's under federal law now. That changed when the Dodd-Frank bill came in, was passed. And they estimate the value of the property because that's the collateral for a loan. The other reason an appraisal might be made during the process of purchasing a house is if it's a cash sale and the buyer wants to make sure the value is there. But that's the purpose of the appraisal, to establish whether there's value. That's one. The appraiser must be, they're required by the ethics of the organization, by the ethics standard, by law, to be unbiased. They can't favor one party over the other. And it makes no difference if the seller is the one that pays them or if the buyer is the one that pays them. Typically, the buyer pays the lender pays the appraiser. They are obligated to be unbiased. They can't favor any party. And that's the reason for an appraisal. Typically, but not always, the appraisal is ordered after the home inspection, because they don't want to put out the money. If it's not going to meet in a home inspection, they don't pay the money for the appraisal. So the appraisal is ordered by the lender, and the appraiser makes an appointment to see the property and goes out and looks at it. Now, there are several ways they can do it. They can do a drive-by, look at it from the street. They can do an exterior, walk around the property, or they can do a full appraiser, interior. And that's usually what Fannie Mae, VA, and Freddie Mac, all the companies, FHA require. So that's what they do. And they are supposed to look at it like the typical buyer would look at it. In other words, you go in, you're not going to do a home inspection, but you're going to look at it like a typical buyer would walking through. And then you report. However, they are obligated by law to let anyone know if there are any health and safety issues. In other words, broken windows, trip hazards, all sorts of things like that. But that's what they do. Does that give you a fairly general idea? Okay.
That's good. Yeah, I think a lot of people get confused what that appraiser is doing versus the inspection. So that helped a lot. Kevin?
And they measure the house. That's the other thing. And that's really important. The county records are often wrong. Something was built instead. There's been a house that's been added on. Is it heated? Is that room heated and cooled? Would a typical buyer consider it living space? The appraiser has rules they have to follow in order to include it as living space. And they measure the exterior of the house, and then they walk through it. And so that's what they see. So you get an accurate measurement of the living area of the house, which is different than the footprint, okay? Living area is where it's heated and cooled, And you live in it, so your living room. It's not your.
How do I know if that appraiser is certified? And I'm sure not all appraisers are the same, right?
And so that's it. And there are three levels of certification. There's the general certified, and they do commercial work. So it used to be that people would want an MAI to do it. Well, if they're only doing commercial, they often don't understand houses. It's like they may be specializing in, one kind of, it's like having a pediatrician and a heart surgeon. They're both doctors, but they both specialize in other areas, okay? And then you have a licensed, and a licensed person is learning. Often they're very good, but there are very, very tough exams. In order to become an appraiser that's certified, you have to have 4 years of college. You have to apprentice for 2 years. So it's a 6-year education process. It's not like taking a 90-hour course, bam, you're an appraiser. No, it's much more stringent than that.
Great. Thank you.
Joanna, let's talk a little bit about getting ready for an appraisal. Are there any tips for, this is probably a 3-part question: buyers, sellers, and then also I failed to mention that Joanna is also a real estate agent. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but is there any tips that the buyers should take in getting ready for an appraisal, or is it just the appraisal happens and on our way?
The buyers really don't do anything. They are not supposed to talk to the appraiser. They can't call them up and ask questions because even though they paid for the appraisal, the client is the lender. There's a barrier there. The sellers should get their home ready, just as if you were going to show it. I can't tell you how many houses I've been in that have been under contract and they're packing boxes all over. That doesn't make a difference if they're all in one place. But unmade beds, laundry hanging from the shower curtain, dirt, just sloppiness, dirty dishes in the sink, counters, covered with things. Why does that make a difference? And I love it when they say, but we live here. And I go, yes, you live here. Do you want to continue to live here? Or would you like to have this contract go through? And the reason is that the appraiser, for most appraisals, I'd say 90% of appraisers has to take pictures. And when they take pictures and they send them to the lender looks at this and what do they see? They see your dirty clothes, they see the unmade bed, they see the laundry hanging, they see the dirt. You want that property to show as good as possible. And so therefore, you need to have it looking good. If you're selling it, then you need to, get an inspection and fix all the stuff, fix the broken windows, the torn screen, paint the front door, make it look good because you're having your picture seen, the appraiser sees it, and they're looking at it as the typical buyer. And when you walk into a house with the front door all scratched, a torn screen, a trip going into because you have a loose floor mat and dirt, the appraiser is going to see dirt equates to not maintained. First there's clutter, remove the clutter. You're going to move anyway. Pack all that stuff up, put it in the garage. Everybody understands a garage full of boxes. Pack it up. The second thing is get rid of the clutter. So you get rid of the clutter and then you clean, because clean symbolizes maintenance. Change the air filters, for example, so you don't have soot lines coming out there. Make sure make it look pristine. And that's the same way you'd want to do it if you were selling it.
Yep. So how about agents? And like I said, Joanna is also a real estate agent. And when we were at the same brokerage together, Joanna gave me a book, and Annette and I always take this book to our listing appointments. And the book is called, can I get it there? Up Your Value. And so all depending on what the home looks like, what Joanna was just talking about, as an agent, we would give this book out. If it was in pristine shape, we would just keep the book, or we'd give it to them and just said, you don't need to really go through this book because everything is just beautiful. But is there tips for agents? How about talking to the appraiser, meeting the appraiser, giving them documentation, paperwork, whatever?
That's really important. Now, there used to be this feeling that you couldn't you couldn't talk to the appraiser. You can talk to the appraiser, but you talk about the property. You don't try to convince them it's worth more or less. One of the things an agent can say is, these are the properties I used to establish the listing price. You're just giving the appraiser information, and you hand them a packet of the properties that you pulled up that were comparable, if you're an agent, that are comparable to the subject. Because some appraisers may not be terribly familiar with the area. And if you've done any homework on it by calling and say, yes, this sold, but there was this concession. Or, by the way, they bought out the solar panels or whatever. And so you have added information. You can certainly give them a packet and give them a floor plan, and if possible, even send it to them ahead of time. That is very, very helpful for an appraiser, and most appraisers will appreciate it. But you can't talk value. You can't say, well, what do you think it's worth? Or they really need to get this house. Don't go there.
Yeah, I like being able to meet them and just get there to the property and meet them and hand them that packet and go from there. And just, I don't talk about market conditions and, is it a seller buyer's market? What's going on? Just hand them the packet and go from there.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mike, I think you got another.
Yeah. I just wanted to know the role of the appraiser in the escrow process. So, maybe you can just share the overview of the escrow process.
Well, typically you have the purchase agreement signed, and then you have the 10-day inspection period. After the inspection period, the appraiser comes in, and they usually try to get it out between 3 and 5 days. You can even ask your lender to ask them to come earlier, or they schedule an appointment. The appraiser calls the homeowner to schedule the appointment. So then they walk through, they turn it in, and that's pretty much the end of the appraiser's role, because the appraisal goes to the lender, and it's the lender's property, and the lender takes it from there. But let me give you 2 caveats. All right, let's just say that the appraisal did not come in at the selling price. All right, then
Gotcha.
what happens?
Yes.
At that point in time, the buyer can ask for a reconsideration of value. The seller can't, because the seller is not part of the deal between the buyer and the lender. But the buyer can say, I'd like to have a reconsideration of value. And they send that to the lender sends it to the appraiser. And if the buyer's agent has been, preparing and has other properties they'd like to use as comparables, then they can submit those at that time, and the lender will pass those on to the appraiser to consider in a reconsideration of value. Or they may have additional information. Oh, by the way, what you didn't know, for example, was that the roof was going to be replaced. So the appraiser might have appraised it as if the roof were old, but part of the contract that they may not have seen was an agreement between the buyer and the seller to have the roof replaced, which would add $10,000 to $15,000 to the value. Yeah. They may have additional information, so that's one thing. If it's a VA appraisal, there's something called the Tidewater. The Tidewater, they also ask for a reconsideration of value to go back in and look at it, and and that's automatic. Then the buyer's agent has the right to give the appraiser other information to consider. And sometimes appraisers haven't been given all the information. They may be given a copy of the contract, but then you have the inspection period. And during the inspection period, there may have been flaws that came up. And those flaws were part of the negotiations and were corrected by the seller, which could add value. And that could be like a new roof, replacing the water heater, putting in new carpet, whatever it was, fixing things. But the appraiser is not given the BIMSR, and the appraiser may not be given that addendum.
Yes.
Could increase the value. And so that's where they would come in during the escrow process in order to reevaluate the property.
Right. Thank you for that clarification.
And I think that's very important, going back to what I asked earlier about the tips for the agent to prepare themselves, because they're working for the seller. They represent the seller. And if you've got a $400,000 home and that's the accepted price on it, we always try to get as many receipts and upgrades and all that kind of stuff. We got a home coming up in Sun City West soon, and it's going to have a nice price tag on it, but the upgrades and everything they've done to this home, we think the value is what we're going to list it for. And we're preparing the seller to, if it's a loan that we're going to have to get this appraised, buyer will, and we need all the stuff that you've done to the home to get the value out of it. So I think it's very important for the selling agent, or the listing agent, excuse me, to get that information and give it to the appraiser at
You're
upfront.
exactly right, Kevin, and I should have mentioned that. One of the things the seller can do is to make a list of all of the upgrades. Have a list of the receipts. If the appraiser wants to see them, may not, but they can always have a list. New roof, 2 years ago, new water heater, new air conditioning, HVAC. The three most important things in a house right now that I see are the roof, big ticket, the HVAC, big ticket, and windows, especially in homes that have single pane windows. People come in and they're going, it's almost at 10, 15, 10,000, 20,000, almost 10,000 a piece, and say a $15,000 to $16,000 home, 16,000 square foot, 1,600 square foot home. So having a list ready for the appraiser that you can hand them is going to be a big advantage, both to the appraiser and to the seller, because I did a house once, and I can remember they goes, we didn't count all the new electrical work. I said, nobody told me about electrical work. You didn't have it in the listing. Well, it's all been rewired. I said, well, how am I supposed to know? I'm an appraiser. I can't look behind the walls to see if it's been rewired. The electrical box is there. How would I possibly know unless you told me? And the same with the roof. Unless you tell me, I'm not going to go up and look at the roof. That's not my job.
Yeah.
So
another thing that comes up a lot nowadays is solar panels. Can you explain just a little bit where the value comes in on an appraisal, or no value to the solar panels? What's the difference? Paid, prepaid, lease, etc.
a lease or prepaid lease is not allowed to be included in an appraised value because it's personal property. Period. The rule, the law, and the story. Can't do it. Now, if it is an owned system, then it can be included if you can find comparables. But then again, it depends on the age of the system and the competency of the real estate appraiser. And so if it is an owned system, then it needs to be included what the savings have been on this. So that's really important. So can you track the savings and show where the amount was before and what it is currently, along with the now that you have the solar? So that's one thing. Solar leases can be a real problem, and you need someone to look it over. There are a couple people that specialize in solar. Dave Stone is one. I have done one, and you analyze the lease. And in some cases, it's advantageous for the seller to buy the lease out and have a prepaid system, and maybe even make a deal with the buyers that each pays half. The buyout is $20,000, you each contribute 10 and get it paid off. So that's the problem. But solar can be a real bugaboo for appraisers and for the sellers. It can handicap the sale.
Yeah.
I love stories. So can you share a real life story of an appraisal? And it can be a bad or good result.
Oh, you mentioned solar, and I had a property that was listed and been on the market for quite a while, went off, and I picked up the listing. And the house had been updated. And so, but when they moved out, they didn't, the baseboards were dirty. I mean, the house was really nice, and the walls were dirty. And so I told the seller that he needed to get a handyman in, have all of the walls touched up, have all of the white baseboard painted. It was gray with white. Have all of the carpet had been put in, but there were little tufts where it wasn't tucked in, to make sure everything was pristine. Then I had someone come in. I was selling it, but I had someone come in to clean it. But when it appraised, it looked brand new. And so therefore, they went in and they went, oh, the other thing that was important about this, because there was an appraisal done on it, was that it had a walk-in tub. Now, walk-in tubs are a problem. They can be a handicap to sale. They cost a lot of money to put in and a lot of money to take out. And they're often. And so in this particular case, the seller told me, I said something as well, it's going to cost $5,000 or $6,000 to take out that tub. He said, why? He said, all they did was pop it in. We'd had these showers done ahead of time. And then they just put the tub in and caulked around it. So it cost $200 to take it out. So that information provided to the appraiser made a big difference, because instead of deducting it, it was a non-issue. So that goes to one, get your house prepared for sale. Make sure that when somebody walks in, it looks as good as it can. If a market is going up, the appraiser must use past information. So they use sales that have already closed. And those sales have probably closed at a lower price than the market is when it's going up. So they often can come in a little bit under value. And they can't put into an appraisal. They can put it in, but they can't put any weight on an appraiser on a sale that is pending or active, because it's not a fact. It's just pending, it hasn't closed. And so often the appraiser is at a disadvantage because they're appraising things from previous history. This is especially true right now because we don't have a whole lot of sales and we don't have a whole lot of comparable properties out there to choose from. But the reverse is true. If the market is going down, then they also have wholesale, so they often come in higher than they probably should have.
Well, we bought our house a couple of years ago. The market was changing every week. How do appraisers do what they do when you have that much volatility in the market like that?
Well, what you do is you go in, the MLS, our Arizona Multiple Listing Service is fabulous. And you go in and you can get graphs and you can track it. And you can drafts over a month. There's a company called the Cromford Report. And they also, a lot of appraisers, and I certainly do subscribe to that. So I can track the median price, the average. Now, you don't want to use average price because a couple of really high sales and without a lot of sales can really throw a market off. So like when you look in the newspaper, all the sales this month, we did this compared to that week. Yeah, but you had 5 sales and 2 were in the high 9s and the other 2 were in the 5s. That's going to give you a different average than if you had 6 sales and they all were in the middle. See what I mean? So you look at median, how many prices fell over and under. So you look at that and you do your calculations. Otherwise, you stay within a community. And there's been a lot recently about bias, bias in appraisers. Listen, appraisers are not biased. They have to stay within a certain area. And anybody who's looked at the market can say, you can take the same exact house and you can put it in Surprise, and you can build it in Scottsdale, and you can build it in Gilbert. It costs the same to build that house. Why is there a difference in price? Location. Because of all the factors, the location is the most important. Whether you're on a golf course, and where on a golf course you're located is important, or on a busy street, or in one section of town, or in another. And so you use the properties that are as close to the subject as you can in the same neighborhood with the same amenities and with the same locational differences. In other words, you wouldn't compare a horse property to a golf property.
Thank you very much, Joanna. We really appreciate it. And I think one of my biggest takeaways of all this is as an agent, real estate agent, put a little effort into it. Put a little effort into the price that you're going to list the house for. And if it is going to get a loan on it, research it, get the documents, give them to the appraiser, the receipts, everything, put it all together. So I think that's one of my biggest takeaways is just don't, get a call from the lender or the listing agent or the buyer's agent and say, hey, the appraisal is going to be on Tuesday at 3:00, and go, okay, thanks a lot. And don't do anything about it.
So can I, one of the things that you also can do is get a pre-listing appraisal. If you're not sure of the square footage, get somebody to come out and measure it. Appraisers will do it for very little money, $100, $150. It's worth it to have it accurate and substantiated, and you know what you're going to get to. Have a pre-appraisal done, and then you know what you can list it for, and you take the liability off yourself if you're a real estate agent. And then, because you're going to have odd houses, and that's, and you're going to go, heck, I don't know what to do with this. Get something, so you're warned. And then ask the appraiser, if you're worried about the value, what could we do to increase the value? What could you, and then then so you have that knowledge before you even put it on the market.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate it, Joanna. You've always given us words of wisdom when it comes to the appraisal process. And
thank you for asking me.
We appreciate it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, contact us and hit that like button. And we'll see you next time on the Know-Hows of Real Estate. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.